I began reading and listening to creepypastas several years ago, and I quickly realized that there were different kinds of stories. There were the cursed games and lost episodes, which I for the most part didn't enjoy, but also rituals, monsters and demons. Although many of these stories are easily on my top 10 favorite creepypastas of all time, they are not the ones which really caught my fancy. It was the believable stories which really made my blood run cold. So, here are my pick on the top 10 most believable creepypastas. Before the countdown begins, however, I must remind you that these are my top 10 believable creepypastas, and you may very well disagree with me. I will therefore include 5 honorable mentions, which I believe many of you would put on your own list. I might forget some little gem as well. I am also Swedish, so my English isn't my first language, so I'm sorry for any mistakes. With that said, let's begin. Number 10. Bus Driver. This story, for those who might not know, tells the tale of a bus driver who lost several mental patients he was transporting to the state insane asylum when he went to a bar for some drinks. The bus driver was worried that he might lose his job, so he came up with an idea. He pulled down the first bus stop he found and brought all the people waiting there to the insane asylum instead. When the error was finally discovered by the staff, many people had actually gone insane. It might be the simplicity of the story, or the straight approach, which really gets to me. How easy it would have been for someone to do that. Maybe someone really did. Well, who knows? Number 9. The Trap. Another short story, with a date this time. This tale starts off in Berlin after World War II, where the people were suffering. There was a shortage of money, supplies and food. A blind man walked up to a woman and asked her for a favor, if she could deliver a letter to the address on the envelope. She agreed and started walking, but as she turned around to ask if he needed something else, she saw the man running through the crowd without his cane and smoked glasses. Suspicious, she went to the police, who later visited the address. They discovered 3 butchers who had been harvesting human flesh and then selling it to the starving people. The real twist, however, is when it's revealed what the envelope contained. A simple note stating, "This is the last one I'm sending you today." Who knows if people actually did that, or even worse, still do. Do you know what you are really eating? Or even worse, who? Very creepy story indeed, but let's move on to number 8. Number 8. This Man. This one is probably one of the most believable creepypastas I've ever seen. I still can't decide if it's real or not. The only reason it's not higher on the list is because it's not that creepy. Well, for those of you who've never heard or read about This Man, it goes a bit like this. The patient of a well-known psychiatrist in January 2006 draws the face of a man who has appeared in her dreams. She says that he has given her personal advice several times. She then claims to never have seen him while awake. The drawing lies on the psychiatrist's desk for a few days, until another patient recognizes him from his dreams. The drawing is then sent around all across the world, and everywhere people recognize him from their dreams, although no one claimed to have seen him while awake. The real creep factor is that there are actually a website all about him. So, is it true or not? You decide. Number 7. Normal porn for normal people. This tale is, in my opinion, not like the other stories on this list. Perhaps it is because many of the other stories are coated in a thick layer of nostalgia, while this one isn't. Anyways, this creepypasta is fairly long, so I will skim over the details. The tale starts off with the protagonist receiving a weird email containing a link to normal porn for normal people. The page looked fairly boring, with a weird tagline and a bunch of incoherent text. The protagonist couldn't find any hyperlinks that would lead him to the allegedly normal porn, and was about to leave when he noticed that every word of the weird text was its own hyperlink. He went through a lot of links after that, until a video called peanut.avi started to download. The video was of a man feeding a dog a peanut butter sandwich while a woman watched. The protagonist continued to watch a few more videos, most of them with no real sexual content. He then begins to describe those videos with actual creepy content in more detail. The last video that is described went something like this. A blonde woman is tied down to a bed with her mouth taped over. She tries to scream for help, to no avail. This goes on for 7 minutes. Then a man in a black suit and mask opens the door and lets a starved, abused chimpanzee into the room. The animal goes into a frenzy and begins to maul her. This continues for 7 minutes and finally ends with the chimpanzee eating her corpse. This isn't a very great read in my own opinion, since I find the writing a bit, well, unpaced. However, the content the story describes is truly horrifying, and I really believe some people do make these kinds of videos. If the videos in this story really happened or not, well, that's up to you to decide. Number 6. The Never-Ending Road. This one is pretty old, and is, according to me, rather believable. This story tells you about a road known by the locals as the Never-Ending Road. The road's true name was Lester Road and lay in Corona, California. Lester Road was an unlit road, and people claimed it became a never-ending road during night. Those who drove it during the night were never seen or heard from again. The author then tells the reader about the time he began driving up the road at night, but quickly turned around due to it looking like it went on forever. Eventually, law enforcement investigated the road due to people not wanting to drive it, even during the day. It was revealed that Leicester Road took a sharp left turn without any guardrails. Beyond the curve lay a canyon, and on the other side of the canyon was a road that lined up very well with Leicester Road when viewed from the right angle, especially during night. Several cars were found in the canyon, filled with decomposing bodies of the victims still strapped to their seats. I think it is the fact that the road actually exists, except it's now called Leicester Avenue, which makes this story so believable. Although, shouldn't the police have investigated due to all the missing persons, instead due to the legend? Well, moving on. Number 5. The Russian Sleep Experiment. This is probably one of the first real creepypastas, and I believe everyone who knows what a creepypasta is also knows about the Russian Sleep Experiment. Therefore, I will only do a short summary, and if you haven't already read or listened to it, do it! The story goes as follows. Russian scientists in the 1940s kept 5 people awake for 15 days using an experimental gas. No cameras and such could be used, and instead they had small windows and a microphone to monitor the subjects. They noticed that the subjects' conversations became increasingly darker and darker, and they eventually became more paranoid. After 9 days, one of them began screaming. They began covering the windows with their own feces, and the screaming promptly stopped. After some time, the researchers decided to open the chamber to investigate, which they originally hadn't planned to do. What they found? Well, that you'll have to find out for yourself. This story isn't believable in the sense that it could happen today, like many of the other stories on this list, but in the way that it could have happened in history. We know some of the inhumane experiments conducted during war times, and the setting isn't that unlikely. What transpired, however, isn't that reality-based, but creepy nonetheless. Number 4. Penpal. The 6-chapter-long story Penpal is most probably one of the most well-known and beloved creepypastas out there, and I have to agree, it is easily on my top 5 favorite creepypastas ever. The entire story is very long, but for those of you who haven't read or listened to it, here are the basics. The story consists of several recalled memories from the author, where he goes over details in his life, which he previously has overlooked or forgotten. I really don't want to spoil it for you by revealing any twists and turns, but let's just say that there's a stalker who is very fond of the author, and we get to hear about incidents in his life where the stalker gets a bit too close and creepy. Why I believe it deserves a spot on this list is because it is so well grounded into reality. Stalkers are all around us, and some do get a bit too personal. Whether they go as far as the stalker in Penpal or not, I'm not sure, but it sure is a great read/listen. Many people might rank it higher, but know that these last 4 stories were hard to place just right. Number 3. Autopilot. Okay, this one is definitely nostalgia, as it was one of the very first creepypastas I ever read. It therefore really got to me, and well, I find it rather believable. The writer begins by asking if you've ever forgotten your phone, which of course we all have. How we realize that we have forgotten it is not by suddenly remembering out of nowhere, but being reminded of it, by breaking the autopilot. With that said, the writer forgot his phone and went to drop off his daughter Emily at the nursery before going to work. It was a really hot day, and he heard his daughter shift over behind him to get out of the sun. But he got to work and, well, worked. When the day was over, he went home again. But this time he noticed a weird smell in his car. Probably just the hot sun releasing car smells. When he got home, his wife reminded him about picking up Emily. When he got there, however, he saw a note about vandalism overnight, and that he should use the side door instead. This broke the autopilot, and he realized that he never dropped off his daughter. He now knew what that smell really had been. This might be a bit more sad than creepy, but this has happened several times, so it's definitely grounded in reality and definitely deserves the number 3 spot on this list. Number 2. I wasn't careful enough on the deep web. This story, among a few other similar stories, are the reason I am very hesitant about accessing the deep web. It is fairly long, so here's a short summary. If you don't know what the deep web is, it is, in a very basic form, the parts of the internet that Google can't find for you. The deep web is much larger than the surface web, the normal web. Let's just say that the person who wrote this story got to a site he really didn't want to see. A big forum where murderers could post pictures of their victims. The protagonist replied to one of the comments and said that what they did was sick and that he would call the police. After that, the site went black. A chat box appeared where someone wrote that he would regret it if he called the cops. When he reached for his phone, he saw that he had a message that said, "Call the cops and you're dead." His full name and address also got sent to him, and his webcam turned on. He followed the man's instructions on how to make it impossible for him to ever go back. This story is a 2-part story, and if you want to know what happened after that, you will have to read it for yourself, or listen to it. Suffice to say, it contains a lot of gore. The deep web is very creepy indeed, and who knows what really happens there. Let's just say that this story at least has me convinced to not accessing the deep web. Before I reveal the number 1 pick, here are 5 honorable mentions that didn't quite make the list. The Rake, Gateway of the Mind, Ben Drowned, 1999, Slender Man. Number 1. HEROBRINE. You might not have seen this one coming, but hey, here it is. This is probably one of the most believed video game myth / creepypastas ever. I know at least I was scared of him and really did not want to find him, or he finding me. The original story, which led to the HEROBRINE hysteria, goes as follows. The player spawned in as normal in single-player survival mode, and began doing the normal starting stuff, like chopping down trees. He then noticed something amongst the dense fog. He played on a tiny render distance, and pursued it, hoping that it was a cow. However, it was no cow, but another character, with pure white eyes. He then disappeared. The player then began to see weird things in the world that couldn't spawn in naturally, like 2x2 tunnels and trees without any leaves. The player asked around on several forums, to no avail. His posts got deleted, and he received a PM from username HEROBRINE to stop. But he eventually came in contact with other players who had spotted him as well. Some digging revealed that there was a Swedish gamer, allegedly the brother of Notch, who went by that username, and the story ends with the player emailing Notch, who tells him that he had a brother, but that he's no longer with them. Although it now seems a bit silly that so many believed in this, myself included, it sure was believable at the time, and definitely deserves to be the #1 most believable creepypasta. So, what do you think? Did I get it right, or should some other story take the crown? Do you like these kinds of videos, and should I do more of those? Let me know in the comments.